Okay, Jane. My middle name is Jane. This was meant to be, wasn't it, Jane? Okay, let's go, Jane. Oh, it's so good to see everybody for a Writers Read special event. This is happening, but hold on to your hats because I've changed one line of the poem, of Paul Niebank's poem. So stay with me here. I hope I can get it right, Jane. So I say a line, you say a line. Here we go. Write, write, write. Write, write, write. Until you get it right. Until you get it right. Then write a book. Then write a book. Have a look. Have a look. You've brought us great delight. Oh, I have had so much fun with this book. I just keep it very, very close because it's an amazing book. You'll find out that it's an amazing book. Okay, now we're going to let you know the plan for the afternoon. The afternoon plan is we are going to get started with some parts of the book, but after Jane and I are done talking together, we're going to have some photos that are from the book and that have some, oh, and Nick said there are no captions.
The captions are off?
Yeah. Okay. May all our troubles be little ones. Okay. And then we'll have a Q&A, and then Jane will be at this white table to sign books if you'd like her signature. This is so exciting. Now, the book. I want you to all promise me from here on out, when you open a book, you go slowly enough to read the dedication. I think the dedication tells you something always about the author. So we are starting with Jane's dedication in her book, The Woman in the Room. To my wonderful family, my dear friends, my clients, employees, students, and colleagues who have been part of my story, I thank you all. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, Jane, here we go. We're going to start with her first sentence in the prologue. I was 9 years old when I knew I would be an architect. Well, Jane, that stopped me in my tracks right there. How did you know that?
Well, I finally decided I had no choice. And if you read the book, you'll find out. There were too many things, too many factors. I don't think I had a choice. It was predetermined.
A little bit farther here, it says it was 1937, and my father laughed when I announced this. I didn't know anyone in my West Seattle, Fauntleroy neighborhood who was an architect. No one in my immediate family had yet graduated from high school, let alone university. But the foundation was there, laid when I was very small, visiting my grandparents' home on the north side of Seattle's Queen Anne Hill. And there are some lovely homes, aren't there, Jane? And you visited them? You visited your
Yes,
grandparents
I
there?
visited, but that was a little bungalow, because we're talking about the Depression years. It was not a-
Okay, see, that's what we need to
home.
know.
Okay, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want you to miss the parts of the book that are so interesting. She has put a list of architectural works. She has put an appendix of world travels, and she has put an index of people and places. Okay, here we go. Early years, Fauntleroy and West Seattle. Jane, describe it a little bit for us, will you?
Well, actually, Nancy's also from Fauntleroy, part of her year too, and felt so lucky that was where I was raised. I've always said it was the perfect village to raise a child. We had the beach, we had the woods, and we just had this wonderful little community that was just kind of isolated from the rest. So I started to school when I was 5, and that's not because I was ready, but they had to have one more student or they'd close the first grade. Okay. The teacher would be unemployed and there wouldn't be any first grade. And I guess they were going to homeschool or do something in those days in the Depression. And as Nancy said, by the time I got to the 4th grade, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I came from a family where all the women worked. Most women were listed as housewives. True, that mine were housewives, but they also had full-time jobs. And I was very much aware I was going to grow up and work. That nobody was going to save me from this. And so better choose something you want to do. All little girls at that time was talking about being a nurse or a teacher. And boy, those two things were at the bottom of my list of what I wanted to do. And so I announced to my parents. I will add, after my father laughed, my mother said, "I wouldn't laugh if I were you, Harry." Yeah. Mothers know their children quite well. Okay. So do we just go on through the early years? So, of course, eventually I went to a junior high school. And of course, this is at the time that World War II. Well, by the way, there were 10 of us in my class at Fauntleroy, and 3 girls and 7 boys. And I had 2 older brothers, and this was a boys' generation and in boys' neighborhood. And we had the YMCA right across from our wonderful little school, and the church that the neighbors, the men, the community from the community had built some years before. And this was the little nugget in the middle of the woods between the people who lived on the hill and the people who lived on the beach. And it was just a great place. So we went off to junior high school. And there was, we were doing fine, and until in English class I had to write what we were going to be when we grew up. And I was going to be an architect. I was held after class. Nice teacher tried to convince me they would never let me be an architect, and she didn't want to see me hurt. I had to change my goals. Didn't faze me a bit. We got on to high school, and in 1943, during the war, it did a wonderful thing. It opened the boys section of school. Some of you are old enough to know that there used to be that workshop boys went. There was just a magic line that girls never stepped across. But because of the war problem and needing people to work, the auto shop and drafting and a few things like that were open for training to work during the war. So I took an architectural drafting program, and that was the first class where I was the only girl in the class, the only woman in the room. That was my first class. The drafting instructor had been brought out of retirement during that time. He was the only person I ever had in school that said he didn't see any reason I couldn't be an architect. Other than that, everybody was discouraging. Okay. But it didn't really mean, obviously, it didn't affect me a great deal. And so I was so concerned about getting through school. I set my goals at that point. My goals were I was going to get through the university and get a degree. Next, I would get my license. And next, I was going to go to Europe. And those were my 3 goals. And that's where I was headed. So Want to go
Oh,
on to the
Jane, I
university?
like that list,
Okay.
because you did it, didn't you? You went to college, and tell us a little bit about how college went for you. It wasn't straight 4 years, was it?
No. First of all, architecture, a Bachelor of Architecture is a 5-year degree to begin with, okay. And I knew I had to put myself through school. I knew from in the 4th grade that my parents would never be afford to send me to school, and I'd have to do it on my own. So I was ready, and by the way, I had a job, a paying job when I was in the 4th grade. That was my first, and I always had a job all my life, doing something that I got paid for by outside of my family, okay, because I never had an allowance ever as a child. So when I started the university, I had to, of course, face the chairman, or Professor Herman. He was not in a good mood to begin with. And so he just gave me a lecture about that this was not a school for women. And that besides that, I would, never do anything with it if I did go through school, but he didn't think I would. I was certainly wasting the state's money. And here we were with all these GIs that had just come home from the war and were in school, and he didn't want me depriving them of their, real place in school. Although the university had no restrictions on enrollment at that time, so there wasn't any, he couldn't keep me out. And when I announced to him that I could only go to school part-time because I had to work, so I said, okay, I figured that it would take me 7 years to finish 5 years. And he said, and I said, and I had to go to work. And he said, impossible, you can't do this. And I thanked him, and out I went. I will say that the secretary outside his desk, or outside his area, who really kind of directed the school and scheduled everything, stopped me and she said, young woman, I want to shake your hand. You're the most logical person that's been through here in a long time. So I entered this class. There were, I think, 200 in that class that started in architecture the year I did. We thinned out rather quickly, and then later on in the design studios and things where we spent so much time together. And all of our courses were our own people. We never saw anybody but our classmates, and most of them were in our building. But even if they weren't, it was our physics for us only, math for us only, that group. So we really got to know each other. So it really came down to, and I was always the only woman in this great group of men, and they all who knew me, but it took me a long time to get acquainted with all of them or their names. But we really bonded, and because we didn't see anybody else, and so we didn't have much choice. But I always said I had the biggest group of big brothers. They were like my own big brothers, out there kind of looking after me in a way, and also teasing me and giving me a bad time as well at times. And so that not only carried on in school, but we did it in the evenings, on weekends when we'd go skiing together. In the summertime, we went backpacking together. And that carried on well through school, and really till we got too old to backpack any longer, some of us. Okay. And so I did graduate, only there 6.5 years, not 7, made it in 6.5. But I did drop out for a spring quarter and a summer for 6 months to work to get money to come back to school. And during that 6 months, I worked at Boeing and got a job based on my math, and I was working in GAPA, ground-to-air pilotless aircraft, Boeing's first space group, and worked on guided missiles, plotting their flights and this kind of thing, and rolling. We were plotting their roll and the pitch and the yaw and this type on telefilm, and it was fascinating. And of course, these were brilliant guys that were around there. Okay, and one of them, I was the head of it, George Stoner. I would meet again later. Okay.
Now, Jane, just for a second here, can you describe, after you've graduated from college in architecture, you do need to pass an exam.
Yep.
Is that right? A state exam or a national?
Well, at that time, licensing was state by state, and that was a 4-day exam, and one day ran, I think, from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, and in order to get licensed. Of course, now it's computerized, amazingly. It's not only done nationally, but the Canadians use the same exam, and so it's a whole different world, let me assure you, on that type of thing. Yes, and so
Okay, so
got
you,
licensed shortly after.
when you went to work at Boeing, you had passed?
No, not when I was at Boeing. That was in
Okay.
48. Okay.
Okay.
That was 1948 on the guided missiles.
Okay.
But I went back to work for them and while I was still a student in the summer, and I worked in plant facilities. And so doing architectural engineering work, in the plant. And first in the plant 2, and then I got transferred, I don't know why, but to plant 1, which was the experimental plant at that time. And the work there was kind of fascinating because we had all these strange, interesting projects. We worked with volatile fuels, nuclear stuff, and isotopes. Well, and they all had these special arrangements. Plus the fact that we were on the banks of the Dirty Duwamish. Well, the whole Boeing was on the banks. And yet, this only place in my career I had to read the tide tables and the wind, predicted wind and things, so you could pour concrete. And we have so many interesting, different types of requirements. So it's a very well-rounded background in industrial buildings and unusual circumstances. So it was really a very valuable part of learning my profession.
Well, so now we're through college. We've passed the exam.
Right.
And the next, every once in a while, I'm going to tell you the chapter titles to see the progress we're making here. We've gone from the early years, and then we went to the university years, and then we go to the Europe adventure, Jane. How did that happen?
Well, we had to go see all those wonderful cathedrals we studied. Okay. And the logical thing was to get a job there. And the fellow was a year ahead of me, was working in Paris, and said, "Oh, come, Jane, come. The government's hiring architects and engineers overseas." So I went down. And that was fine, but not Jane, no. No women. Policy against women, the U.S. government at that time. Not legally, but policy. Okay. Okay. So then I read about they were hiring recreational directors for service clubs, girls. Well, I was raised in the YMCA, and I had a lot of recreational experience and camp counseling and things, and so I applied for that. And the woman looked at me and she said, "Well, we really want people with degrees in recreation and sociology." She said, "Architecture? I don't know." And we had the requirement was you had to have a degree, okay, to be hired. And so she said, "I don't know." But anyway, immediately I got a letter, and they accepted me. And I said, "I can't go now," and this was in January. And I said, "I can't go till May." Every month I got another letter, every month there was another group that left. So finally in May I went. First of all, I spent about 4 days in New York, and a friend there just kept me going 24 hours a day to see all of New York in 4 days. Got on the ship exhausted in an all-women's group. Boy, was that a shock. I'd been around all boys most of my life. Boys I understood. I could count fine. But the women, that was a new learning curve, believe me. We ended up first in Nuremberg. And it was wonderful because I remember Nuremberg from the old newsreel films and Hitler coming into power. And now I was stationed right next to that Zeppelin field where this all took place. Okay, so I was delighted. But that was also our model club. So then it was time to be transferred. So I said, they gave me a choice to what you wouldn't do. They considered that a hardship post. I said, "Oh, I've got to go to the hills. This is too flat for me." Well, Nuremberg's not exactly flat, but by Seattle standards it is. So imagine I was sent to Oberammergau, the highest army post in Europe at that time. Oh, I was in heaven. And back in the mountains, oh, that wonderful fresh air and all. And a little village, of this famous little village, which we affectionately all called Ogao. And it was a school. And a very small permanent staff. There's only about 16 or about 60 people there that were permanently assigned there. Everybody else kind of came and went and came and went. And it was a very, so one day a very interesting thing happened. And I got a call.
Is this one of your stories?
This is my first
Your
story.
first story.
My
Oh,
first
good,
story
Jane.
here.
This is an amazing story.
One nice thing about living in an old hotel, well, it was also the officers' club, which included a good dining room that gave us an opportunity to meet the rest of the staff. About this time, word was out that a general, the air deputy of the NATO Defense College in Paris, had arrived on the post. Because most officers wore civilian clothes when not on duty, we played a guessing game to figure out who he was. To our surprise, he turned out to be the younger of the options. On most Army posts, the civilian service club girls were viewed as outsiders, if not just general nuisances. So it was a real treat, pleasure, that the Colonel Ott, our commanding officer, included us as a full member of his small team. The arrival of the detachment R group and the news that we would all be moving into new quarters were caused for a grand reception at the Officers Club for all the officers and civilian staff, including us 3 service club girls. For us, this was a first. A few days before the party, Vivian and I took the NATO group on an afternoon tour to King Ludwig's Linderhof Castle. The group included about 45 foreign officers, most of them generals, ranking from 1 star to 5 stars from our allied nations. While walking down the path with our busload of delightful men in varying uniforms, our general and his friend caught up to us, and he asked, "Young woman, what do you do?" Surprised, I responded, "I'm the program director." To which he said, "No, I mean in real life." I said, "I'm an architect." At this point, he turned to his very handsome companion and said, $5, please. Apparently, my conversation, which some of the men with some of the men in the group had included an architectural term, which inspired the bet. Air Force Brigadier General Noel Parrish introduced himself and explained that architecture was one of his hobbies. Next, I was to guess the nationality of his companion. I thought his insignia was Turkish, but he did not look like a Turk. This is Parrish's friend was then introduced only as Fike, and I was correct, he was a Turk. It turned out that he was the man, a very handsome man, by the way, who had purchased all the nylon stockings in the PX for gifts for the women he wooed. Our handsome Turk had quite a reputation. A day or two later, I received a call at the service club from General Parrish asking me to accompany him to the Casa Karaoke nightclub in Garmisch. The NATO group was scheduled for another outing. And didn't this fall under our duties? However, the big night was scheduled on the same night as the Colonel Ott's party, and I had already accepted that invitation. When I told the general of my conflict, he replied, "Is it better to please the colonel or the general? I'll speak to the colonel." I assured the general that I could work something out. Also, I was to bring a girlfriend, a date for the Turk. As I was General Parrish's date, the general and the Turk were the only bachelors in the NATO group. After consulting with my friend Colleen, she recommended I arrive at the colonel's official reception early, go through the receiving line, and then join the general. The general agreed, and that he would send his driver to pick me up along with a girlfriend, now whom to ask to be the Turk's date. The Turk was a top conversation of the post, and all my women friends would love to have been chosen. I did not inform any of them of my task. Finally, I settled on Ellen, a quiet girl who was about to return home after 2 years. I was sure there had been little excitement in her life during that time. abroad. And she was thrilled. Ellen joined me at the colonel's party, made more colorful because the Army had just changed their dress uniforms and the new models making them all look like Marines. The general's car arrived right on schedule, and we were surprised to see that he would come with us to accompany us back. Arriving at the Casa Carioca, the general quickly looked around the room. Dinner tables arranged in a U pattern around the dance ice floor. The three of us sat at a table far as possible from the Turk, who was at the opposite corner. The general said, "Watch this. He'll be here in 5 minutes." The master socializer moved through the tables, speaking to all along the way, arriving right on time. The skating show was delightful. Then the dance floor was rolled out over the ice for dancing. Ellen and I, the only women in the group, were very busy. What other American girl has stepped on the toes of a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, and a 5-star general all in one night? Our partners ranged from short, round Italians to a field marshal, the head of the English Air Force, a very large man with heavy eyebrows that cantilevered out like awnings. The Turk was a wonderful, easy partner on the dance floor. He told me he was called the Bad Turk, but didn't explain. When he learned that I had not been to Turkey, he said he was going to take me in his own plane. The general, by now just Noel to me, assured him that I was his date and I would not be going to Turkey. When I mentioned that Pike referred to himself as the Bad Turk, Noel laughed and said, "Not true. He's known as the Terrible Turk." This had been Pike's nickname since he apparently had stolen Lord Mountbatten's girlfriend away from him at the Cairo conference. At the time, Pike was the head of the Turkish Navy. What an evening. Up to this point, my only days in Germany had been with PFC George and Lars, a Norwegian salesman, and now I was dancing with a room full of generals. Finally, Noel and us girls were dropped off back at the officers' club at the Osterbickel Hotel. The colonel's party was still going on with a few diehards who'd had too much to drink and were destroying property. My boyish, soft-spoken general friend took one look at the situation and stated firmly, "Gentlemen, I think it's time you go to bed." Immediately the room cleared and we said our good nights. This had to be the most memorable date of my life.
Oh, Jane, that is amazing. Now, I
Oh,
just...
by the way, the general and the Turk will reappear later in the book, as many of my friends have.
This is how this book reads. You cannot skip a word or a paragraph. It is a page turner, and just that experience could lead to another experience, which it does, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay, we've got to get you back to Seattle because the next chapter is building a career in Seattle. So let's shift gears and bring you back to Seattle and say, how did you get your foot in the door? What happened next? How did you take off?
Well, finally home, I decided, so I went to work for a one-man office. At first, did residential work, and I liked that job. But I also liked being paid, and he seemed to be short of funds too often. Then I decided, big firm, an A&E firm up the street. So at that point, I applied at that job, and this is the second reading, which is not as long. And what happened there? Leo Daly's was a large A&E firm with a home office in Omaha and several branch offices. When I applied, I was sent to the vice president's office to meet with an older man temporarily assigned to the Seattle office to help with hiring. He seemed delighted to see me, explaining that they didn't have any they've never had a professional woman in the firm, and he thought it was time they changed the policy. I was hired because he knew I'd make the grade. But it was clear that if I didn't work out, I would certainly be the first and the last they would ever employ. The Seattle office had almost 100 employees, and only one other woman in it was Norma, a draftsperson in the mechanical engineering. One day, the vice president summons me. Will you go to San Francisco for 10 days to help out in our office there? I could leave, okay, the next day. T.G. Conley and Bruce Mecklenburg, both young men who were married, were the other two on the team. Neither of them had ever been to San Francisco, and they were thrilled. And I could be their guide. There was one problem. The San Francisco office manager had requested the 3 best architects, but no women. I was told to go anyway. And remember that I worked for the Seattle office, and they paid the ones who paid me. I should do my job and ignore him. The 3 of us stayed at the Stewart Hotel in the heart of the city, an easy walk to San Francisco's office on Maiden Lane. Famous, and it was above the famous Iron Horse Bar, which we, of course, quickly became regulars. Our project was to produce the working drawings for a Catholic girls' boarding school in Ottumwa, Iowa. My desk was in a corner with walls to the front and a wall to my right. The manager never spoke to me when he made his rounds, checking. He cut across the corner and just kept going. However, I knew he'd been there because when I came back from lunch, tools on my desk had been moved. The rest of the crew, they were from the other branch offices from Omaha and St. Louis, as well as the local crew, were amused, and they kept a close watch on this process. Most evenings we worked late and took a short dinner break before returning to our drafting boards. Then we stopped at the Iron Horse for a good night drink before walking back to the hotel. If we didn't show up by midnight, the bartender would come upstairs and check on us. As this was T.G.'s and Bruce's first visit to San Francisco, I also scheduled places to eat or see in the evenings, no matter what the hour. As our stay then became extended from 10 days to 3 weeks, and I suggested a night off from sightseeing, my teammates were relieved. When our project was finally completed, we planned a farewell lunch at the Iron Horse. Of course, we had a charrette, an all-night session the night before, because there was a lot of bloodshot eyes and 5 o'clock shadows that day, and I was the last to arrive at the bar. Okay. Life magazine for the lunch. Life magazine had just published a big spread on where the swinging singles met in the major U.S. cities, and the Iron Horse was the place in San Francisco. A librarians' convention was also in full swing, and as I entered the bar, I was surprised to see a crowd of beautifully dressed women all wearing hats having lunch. I had to cross the center of the bar to this private corner where 18 men stood up to greet me. I was wearing a linen skirt, blouse, loafers. I was certainly no one special, but all eyes followed me. My co-workers could not resist playing along. I'm sure to this day those librarians thought they had seen a celebrity, but who? Back upstairs after lunch, we gathered our belongings and lined up for the goodbye handshakes before we all returned to our respective offices. I put out my hand just like the guys. The manager took it and he said, "The next time I need help, I'm sending for you." Those were the only words spoken to me during those 3 weeks.
Oh, Jane. Oh, your stories are just wonderful. But Jane, I think it's time to bring Norm into the picture. Oh. Norm Johnston.
Okay.
Okay, we're
right.
going to move along here. And we're talking 1961 is when you met him.
Right.
And you married him in 1969, correct? So tell us how that went. Dear Norm, and you are going to read a little bit about Norm that you wrote in your book. It's just a real nice. Oh, and these pictures. Wait till you see the wedding picture of Norm and Jane, and it's just a wonderful book and story.
Okay. By the way, by this time, of course, I'd established my own business. I'd worked at other firms, which were very interesting. Okay, which are another stories, of course. But here we go. Okay. Norman was back home from Turkey and ready to take up camping and hiking. Once he discovered how well we ate on our trips, he was a convert, and the fall of 1969 was busy. In addition to our backpacking trips, I had 2 jobs, running my office and teaching community college courses for the launch of the architectural drafting program. And with family needs hopefully behind me, I finally said yes, I was ready to marry Norman. He was a man of many wonderful qualities, especially patience. He had been in love with me for years. He proposed the first time back in 1963. My aunts and my father had never understood why I did not get married right out of either high school or college like most of my friends. When they asked, I simply said I was still looking for a foot massager like my father. But Mother had never asked. She knew my career came first, then travel. And she never questioned my decisions, even in childhood. I had established my architectural practice, lived in Europe, traveled in Europe, and seen the historic buildings we studied in school. I owned 100 feet of the Pacific Ocean beach, where the music of the surf was available 24/7. I had dreamed of these things, and I had achieved them. Now I was ready for marriage. My mother was thrilled to have a new son-in-law join our family, which had recently lost members in 4 generations. We set our wedding date for late November, and I knew that this holiday season would be a happy one.
Okay, now, one of the wonderful stories, one of the 100 stories in this book, can you imagine Norm and Jane sitting down and saying, "Oh, what kind of house do we want?" Wow, what? Well, how did that conversation work? We're going to work our way toward the house in Laurelhurst, but there was the Fremont house first. Do you want to discuss that, Jane?
Okay. Well, I had purchased a house in Fremont in in the 66, 67, and I was looking for a house, and all of a sudden they told me about this house that was for sale for $9,000. I said, "What? Is it habitable?" And they said, "Oh yes, people are living in it." "Oh yes, okay." I said, "Well, I have to see that." Okay. So we went to Fremont, and this was an 1891 house that the doctor had built as basically as his home and his office, okay, at that time. And technically, it was $10,000, but they figured it would cost $1,000 to knock the house down, so there was a price of the lot is what it was being sold for. It was a perfectly sound 7-room, 2-bathroom house. You don't knock things like that down. So, okay, so boy, I grabbed that. That was a treasure. But let me assure you, not much had been done since 1891, other than the plumbing came indoors. Oh, and we had wiring. We did have electricity in it, but okay, it was a project, and I was having a great time with that. Okay, so that's where I was living at the time, and had done a lot of restoration. Norman had a new little townhouse that he had designed, a beautiful little thing, and all. But he moved into my house because mine was larger. So we had his house, her house. Now we needed our house. It had to be within a walking distance of the university. So I put the compass in the College of Architecture, okay, and drew a circle. 3/4 of it fell on campus or in the water. So it was that. But we found a lot, an old formal gardens into another house in Laurelhurst, and it was not a very peculiar lot because it was very narrow across on the street side and a little wider, and it was on 2 levels. So we said, "That's okay." The real estate person said, "Would you consider building?" We said, "We never thought about it because there isn't any place, there's no lots available." Well, this lot came up. So the Laurelhurst house took place. Oh. And it was interesting, and I made a model, and I talked to the neighbors because I thought this is going to be a shock, because I had to go up because the house was very narrow. I think it only had 15 to 20 feet across on the street in the front, and then the back was wider, and it was kind of a wedge shape on 2 different levels, and the old gardens. So, but the interesting part about it was as the house did go up, and the people were kind of, and when they put the third floor, we had the basement and then 3 floors. When they put the third floor on, boy, I'm going to get telephone calls now on this one. And even though they had seen the model, no, the only house it affected was the original house, which was behind. And they liked the idea that cut their view of the street off so the people had no view up to their house, and they thought it was just fine.
Oh, my.
And so Norman's requirement for our house, I had to take some of the things from his house in Montlake, his study, his library, and this kind of thing. So he had his requirements. And of course, I had my requirements, and our requirements was lots of wall space because we both collected artwork and all. And it was interesting because he always said, he took up cooking again. Of course, he hung up his apron when we got married, but then he took up cooking 3 nights a week so I could stay at the office late and work on the drawings of the house. And he said he was my worst possible client. He demanded so much, he complained about the budget, and he never paid the architect. But it was a great house, and we really thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course, until we came here to Horizon House. Yeah.
And look in your book for a delightful picture of the entryway and garden taken by Mary Randlett. So that's in the book too. But can you just imagine these conversations? I can't imagine them. Okay, Jane, then do you want to talk? We kind of skirted over all your business doings. Do you want to summarize? Can you summarize your 40 years in Seattle? Or
okay. When I came back, of course, and then I eventually, started working on my own. Did lots and lots of remodelings because at that time, everybody wanted to do new work. But I found remodeling really, almost more fun and enjoyable in a way because it was always a bigger puzzle in some cases. Mm-hmm. And the clients were actually much happier about it because you could take the the thorns out of their paws, and they expect a new house to be perfect, but they don't expect you to take an old house and turn it into magic, type of thing. So, those, by the way, I've had a number of clients that are still friends, and we're still good friends through life. But at the same time, I also got involved in other things, particularly the AIA. I was as a student, but I got locally, and then went up through them. And I finally was talked into running for chapter president for the Seattle chapter by Paul Kirk. Bent my arm on that one, and I said, and Jack Morris. And I said, the boys are not ready for a woman yet, and I said the guys just aren't ready, and they said, well, Jane, they really are. They just don't know it.
They really are.
And so anyway, I demanded that they run a very viable male against me, but I won. And so that started me then, of course, introduced me to the national organization.
Yeah.
And then, of course, one thing led to another. And so later on, I decided to run for the regional director. And our region was the Northwest and Pacific, which was the Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Hawaii, and Guam, and then actually Hong Kong for a while. To go around and work with the small chapters, because most of our members really did not know what a treasure chest the National Institute, the American Institute of Architects, has back in Washington, D.C. And so I was trying to help them and all. And so I went on the board, served my time with another group of wonderful guys, and got off the board, and then went back on when somebody had to leave because of other pressures for another year. And Norman tried to talk me out of this to begin with, but boy, was he having a grand time. He was the only male spouse. I was the only female in the board, and he was the only male spouse. And so he had to entertain the spouses when they came to Seattle. And he said, what do they do? And I said, well, I understand they have teas and luncheons. He said, what? So he went into his study, and he came out a few hours later, and he said, I've got it. And so he took them on a Seattle tour. He started right after breakfast, and they didn't get home till dinner time, and they saw Seattle. He got some of the faculty wives to help him, so he wouldn't lose them in the Pike Place Market and things like this. And so when the husbands came home, and the wives came home even after the husbands got through their meeting, and they were just aglow, and boy, the husbands were not happy. They had missed out. Well, this became a legendary tour that, of course, had to do for every group after that. But what happened after that, every place we went, Norman did his research, and he had his tour ready, his lectures ready, and those women, it was a love affair. He was in love with his new students, and he just had all these women just adoring him and they were learning what their husbands did. Their husbands had never had time to talk to them, and they just thought Norman had come from heaven. And boy, it was good. So we had a grand time, which never really stopped. I had also gotten involved when Princess Grace invited me to Monaco. That was more than I could resist. And that was to an international group of women, Congress of International Group of Women Architects. And so that was their second Congress, and so I stayed with that and still with it. About every 3 years, some other country would do it, and all. So I started meeting the women architects around the world, and then also that led into another one where I got into American Women for International Understanding, which was kind of our government was sponsoring, and started traveling that way. So I had all these sources. And of course, Norman was traveling too. So we had all these connections, by the way, around the world to go calling on when we traveled. So anyway, it all ended up eventually that I became the first woman chancellor of the College of Fellows, which was the highest position, one of the highest positions nationally. It was the first woman to held a national.
That was in 1992,
that
wasn't
was
it?
1992, and
Okay.
I didn't even apply for, somebody else nominated me, and I didn't know about it until I was nominated to this position. I was dumbfounded, and the men were aghast at first. They couldn't believe it.
Jane,
And-
I'm going to take just a minute
Okay.
to point out in the upper right-hand corner of your books, it says AIA. So the AIA is the American Institute of Architects, and the F is a fellow, and a fellowship is bestowed by the Institute on AIA member architects who have made outstanding contributions to the profession through design, excellence, contributions in the field of architecture and education, or to the advancement of the profession.
I said to Nancy, she didn't read my book, she digested it.
I want everybody to clap that you're a fellow of AIA.
I just want to point out, I became a fellow in 1980, and at that time, there were about...
Is it on? Is it okay? It's on. Please say you can hear there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. There were about out of I don't know what our membership was. Right now it was 99, 100,000, something like this. But anyway, there were about 2,500 to 2,800 fellows. Out of that, there were probably less than 50 were women. Okay, when I became a fellow. So this was kind of women were relatively still new. That's no longer true, though. They're coming up with great,
there's a lot of
Yeah.
new women in the field, aren't there? Okay, Jane, let's see. We are going to do number 7, which is move to Horizon House. And let's just briefly describe that move and how did that happen and what happened to the garden committee?
Well, we were on the Horizon House list. We knew we were always going to come here, but we certainly didn't plan on coming as early as we did. But they kept calling about coming and looking at apartments, and we knew we wanted to be in the West Wing because we knew those were the best floor plans. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we went, and all of a sudden we realized they were showing us one in the West Wing. At that, and this was on the A floor, one floor down from the main floor, and the was magnolia trees, and the cherry trees were in bloom in the Freeway Park and the Convention Center gardens out of our window. And Norman looked out the window and he said, "You mean to tell me we could live in the heart of the city and never see a rooftop and never see a street? That's unheard of." Well, anyway, on the way home, we were going to be leaving for Bhutan and Tibet and for about a month in travels. We were going to be gone for a month, in a week and a half, I think. And on the way home, I said, "Well, if you want to do it, why don't we do it?" And he said, but your garden." And I said, "So far I've only planted," this is February or March. "I've only planted the lettuce and the cheese. And if this is August, I would not be happy." Okay. So anyway, we came home, we called up, we said, "We'll take it, we'll be back in a month." Okay. And we're going to renovate it. So we came back and spent a good deal renovating it and moved into AU. And we were the first major renovation ever in the building, and that was a shock in its own right. But we said, we're going to live here a long time. And so, and then Norman kind of immediately, he took over the lectures and things, the committee, and I took over the garden committee at that time. And then, of course, we had planned on building a beach house where we could put everything before we came to Horizon House. So that immediately took place after that. By 97, we were using the beach house on the ocean. And so it worked out. And so up until now, until last August, I was in the West Wing. Okay. I know we're in time trouble.
We're okay, but you have moved, haven't you?
I have moved. I'm still looking for things.
Okay, Jane, I just need to say you were also the chair of, or co-chair of the trip committee.
No, I started that one too.
Oh, you started that one. And I went on one of Norm and Jane's trips to the Lewis and Clark Trail, and we went to the museum in Astoria. It was just a treat to be with both of them on that trip. So thank you for all your leadership.
Yeah. We repeated that years later by requesting this, and people went on it the second time.
Yeah. Okay, now, Jane, your last chapter in your book is called My Last Decade. I don't think we've even touched on what you're doing now. How are your days now, and how are you doing?
My days, well, okay. This was the ninth decade, that was it. That's my last chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. So we started on the ninth decade. And fine. It kind of started with getting a new hip, but the wonderful thing happened.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, they lengthened my left leg, and for the first time in my life, here I was, 89 and a half years old, and my legs were the same length for the first time in my life. Really helps the back, by the way. It's amazing what they can do in medicine these days. Okay, and so, but of course, by this time, Norman was gone. Okay. Norman, we lost Norman in 2015. As long as I sold the beach house at the same time, and my two best friends did that exactly that same time. So now I was kind of in a new sim, and started traveling with some other women on trips and something. We celebrated Fauntleroy School's 100th year, and so it helped organize that.
But
event
do
too.
Stop and mention your colleagues, the students who were in your class, Art.
Oh no,
and Lou.
No. That we're talking about the Whitaker twins and Jim and Lou. They were actually behind me in school, but we were in grade school together.
Okay.
And they reappear, in the book throughout the years too, and but we did one class member did show up for that. But we had a big turnout at Fauntleroy, And that was a grand success. But in the interest of time, we probably need to move on.
We're going to move on, Jane, because I do want you to read that last paragraph in the book, page 366 and 367.
Okay. As I look back, the bookends of my life may be notable for hardships and tragedies, but the years in between have been extraordinarily full of adventure and joyful experiences. I achieved my goals. I became an architect, owned a cabin on the ocean shore, traveled the world, visiting 114 countries at last count. I've had a very special partner for more than 46 years. Of course, there were times long after I was a child in Mrs. Selby's Fauntleroy kitchen when I had to pretend something was pink, but I never stopped loving the great outdoors of the Western Washington, the place I always called home. I'm forever thankful that my parents met in Seattle, created our wonderful family, and we all stayed together there to raise us. Okay. I agree wholeheartedly with the New Zealand architect I met more than 35 years ago. Yes, I do live in the most beautiful place in the world. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jane. Okay. Now, with luck, Nick is going to, Pam here is Nancy, the other mic person.
Yeah, Nick's. Yeah.
Nick's going to start the pictures now. I just want to read one more sentence. This is Jane. Happiness is loving what you are doing, and I never considered changing course.
Nancy, that doesn't go along with a fool never changes his mind, but a wise man does. Maybe I made a mistake.
Okay, now Jane might comment or not comment as she wishes
Okay.
on these photographs.
Of course, every Seattle child. That was a perfect.
Oh.
This is my brother Art and I skiing at Mount Rainier during World War II, and Nancy used to
I've
ski
been
there
up
too.
there.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is my junior. We were juniors here, and I'm sort of. I don't know if you're over in this corner.
I see
That's
you
right.
up
Okay.
here now.
Okay.
And you are the only woman.
Oh yeah, I was the only woman after the first year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is Victor Steinbrook, myself, and the World's Fair. He designed the little pavilion for the World's Fair in 22. No, come on.
62.
62. And I was managed it. This was the 1891 house that
Isn't
they
that delightful?
It's
That's
by
the
the way,
Fremont house.
the Fremont uses it as their grand tour now. And this is the house in Laurelhurst in the garden, part of the garden in front.
That's the Mary Randlett photograph.
Yeah.
Now, what do we need? Nick?
This is Norman got his fellowship 2 years after I did. Norman always said he followed me with medals and things like that, but that's not always true. He came first on something. This is what I call the Dragon Ladies. There were 6 of us that were the same age, born the same year, and the year of the dragon. And 4 of us ended up here in Horizon House, and you just saw Roz, who recently passed away, but she wasn't part of that group, but she traveled with us. And Leslie and Betty and I. This is out at the university. Okay. We're in Bergen waiting for the bus. It was cold.
This is Betty.
There's Betty, and this Margaret Morrison's over here next to
Margaret
Norman.
Morrison.
Remember her?
Yes.
Okay, so we traveled with the group. This is the Fauntleroy, and this is Jim and Lou Whitaker, and I graduated what was it? Okay, 39, and they graduated 2 years later, and then Lori, she also graduated, my niece, from there. This is the past chancellors and past women presidents now of the AIA. This was in 2018. Okay.
Okay. Oh,
Okay, yeah.
we went through that fast.
That's a quick trip through 95 years.
Okay, let's start Q&A. Does anybody have a question after that amazing hour? When did you move?
1995. I've been here 28 years. I have been here. Going on my 29th. Yeah.
Jane, Will you please tell them about Pinky?
Oh, Pinky? Oh,
Oh, Pinky.
Pinky was my car that I bought when I went to Nuremberg. It was a little Austin A40, and it was beige. And I had an African American club director who was an absolute jewel, and so everybody was anticipating my car. So when I finally arrived with the car, and she leaned out of an upstory window and she looked out the window and she said, "Beige?" She said, "That's pink if I've ever seen pink." And so my little car became Pinky the rest of its life. It was wonderful. It got like 45 miles a gallon. And at that time, you could get Army gas at 15 cents a gallon. It was almost $2 on the economy. Okay. Yeah. So
there's a picture of Pinky in the
Pinky's
book.
Pinky's in there. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay.
There goes Nancy.
I didn't know you at the time, but Richard did. And I remember when you and Norman moved into Horizon House, you were on the front cover because of your renovation, the pictures.
On the front cover of the Horizon House or in the paper?
No, on of the Seattle Times, you were on the front page.
That's what. Yeah, we remodeled.
Yes.
Our remodeling job. Oh yes, that was a shock. And basically we did that because of Larry Kreisman, who always wanted to photograph our Laurelhurst house, and we'd never let him do it. And we said, okay, we're in Horizon House now, and because we were too conspicuous, we didn't want people to know what kind of artwork was inside, and everybody knew where the house was, and everybody knew we were never home. So we felt safe in Horizon House, and so that was the first time the Times ever did anything like that, because they said retirement homes were too grim, and that was to assure people you didn't have to live in the Grims thing.
How many of you remember the magazine called Family Circle? Okay. Jane, tell us the Family Circle story.
Well, we were my firm, the Hastings Group, we were invited to do a house for family, the house that all women built for what women want or something. And it was all supposed to be women, throughout. And so it was kind of an interesting project. And the funny part of it was, by the time they built it and they got all the things, there was more money in the so-called decor inside the photograph than the whole house, the whole project cost. They had really lavishly done this for the photographers. But it was a fun project, and then the people could buy the floor plans. But we also did things like, I think Kohler hired us to do bathrooms and things that they used in exhibits and the national conventions, for the home builders and things like that. And we had fun things. And Winfield Homes, there were about, I think, maybe 10 of us, Northwest architects, who were invited to have these stock plans that they used. So they did seek us out to do things like that. And I always say that, I could have gotten a lot more work done before women kind of hit big, because then there were not enough women around to be on all these committees, and it didn't leave us any time for work. And, when the set-asides and things came in, so, yes. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
Jenny?
Oh, boy, Nancy's fast.
I've been blessed to visit you and have you show me some of the buildings, especially those houses that you remodeled for people. And I wonder if sometime you'd do a program here for us where you'd show all of us some of this beautiful architecture that you've been involved in.
Yes, I could do that. I've got the university. There's some of the slides. Most of my things are back in an archive in Virginia, Virginia Tech. They have an international international archive there of women's work, and it's a spectacular. They've done a spectacular job. But I do have things here at the university here as well, and I do have slides. And I can. You're asking me to do some more work. Come on now. I'm retiring. No, I'd be happy to. Jenny.
Oh,
Okay.
my.
All right. Give me a break though for a while.
Okay.
Hello, Henry Matthews. I was going to ask you a similar question, but I'll just rephrase it. Can you tell us about one building that you designed that gave you the most joy?
Oh, no. No. The problem is, people say, well, do you have a favorite country or their favorite, monument, something like this? And no, they're favorites for different reasons, just one. I used to always say, I'm basically not a competitive person, but I like to think I'm in competition with myself. Every job should be better than the last one, or else I'm going backwards or something here. And so some are favorites for different reasons. I did a lot of work for a lot of handicapped people too, which were rewarding, very rewarding to me, that I could make life so much more pleasant for for their situations. And I really enjoyed the residential work more because I liked working with the people. And you have that personal connection where in commercial work and all, it's more business and money and schedules, and you don't have as much personal contact. It's not you don't enjoy them. I do.
Thank you. I especially like you talking about enjoying building for the handicapped.
So, yeah.
Okay. The three people who have written the blurbs on her book are here, evidently. Could you stand up if you're one of those writers who has written? Here they are. Where are they?
Okay, there's Jeffrey. Hi, Eugenia.
Okay.
Where's Lorraine? Is Lorraine here? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. And
I want to introduce my team.
and your team.
I'm not
introduction.
I'm not a soloist. I'm a team player. First, I'm going to introduce my wonderful niece, Lori, who's been with me since she's the best traveling companion I have ever had, even as a toddler. Back there in the red. Okay, Lori Hastings. Also, I suppose they're hiding back there too. There's Kate Hillscraft. And Kate was a former student and a former employee and a long time very special friend. And her husband Chapin came with her today. Okay, and there's also Denise Clifton, and she's Transforming Media, and she came in and she pulled it all together finally. She picked up all the pieces, pulled it all together, and took us across the finish line. And her husband, Christopher Sellers, is back here too, and I don't know. Did Julie Hansen come? She couldn't make it. She's a copywriter editor who tried to make sure that we got all the dots in the right places. So, and I want to thank them. And it's a team effort, but we've had a grand time, haven't we?
I bet they did, but the
Yeah.
book is glued together
thank
so beautifully.
Where there's a specialist printing. This is a special printing, first edition special printing only for Horizon House because of the paper that's in it. And when I saw the first proofs, I said, "Isn't there a nicer paper?" Well, there is a nicer paper, but it's much, much nicer, cost-wise. Okay, and so this is a special printing. Let me assure you, there's absolutely no profits here. Yes, so and this is just for Horizon House, and once this is done, then there'll be regular printing, and there are also hardbacks available too. But there will be, the paperbacks. Okay. They can be ordered from bookstores or, Amazon or whatever.
Okay, well, we've had a jolly good time, haven't we, Jane?
Well, Nancy and I've had a good time too.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank
See
you.
you at the next Writers'
And
Read.
thank you for coming. Okay.